Yes guys, welcome back to another Fantasy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho, and in this video we need to discuss the best Salah and Son replacements for your FPL teams. I think that's the hot topic right now, and I think we do need a conclusive answer, and hopefully I will give you that in this video. As always, if you're looking forward to today's video, please do consider dropping a like and smashing the subscribe button. It is always appreciated with your support. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So before we get into any of these players that we need to discuss, I do want to note that we will be having upcoming double and blank game weeks between game weeks 25 up until game weeks 29. However, we don't really have any clear information who exactly is going to double in this game weeks and blank. There are rumours that potentially Liverpool, for example, will double in game week 25 and then blank in game week 26. But again, because we don't have any conclusive information right now, I'm just going to go off exactly what we do know. But my full recommendation is to make sure you are following Fantasy Football Fix on both YouTube and Twitter, as we will keep you up to date whenever any information does drop, as well as sharing obviously any of the content creators that do make predictions. It is sometimes useful to know, but for now we're working off the information we definitely know. So first I want to touch on the budget replacements. I think these are really important to have in our teams, because when we do look to sell the likes of Mo Salah and Son, and maybe you don't already have Erling Haaland in your team, we kind of forget that we eventually want these premiums back in our teams. And these budget enablers do give us the opportunity to keep cash in the bank, knowing that it is there to buy these premiums later down the line. So you can kind of go two different directions. You either invest it in a player or you keep it in the bank. Going for these players kind of gives you the option to keep the money in the bank, but I think these are both brilliant picks. So first up, Cole Palmer. I don't really need to deep dive too much into him because he's been such an unbelievable player this season, and the underlying numbers suggest that as well. 0.51 XG per 90. Yes, he has some penalties in there, but we also have seen him really contribute in open play, so I don't think we need to look at it and think he only scores penalties like a certain Douglas Luiz. This guy has everything, and the fact he's on penalties makes him an incredible asset. And also in the expected assists, he's being the chance creator in this Chelsea team at 0.34 per 90, and you can see the big chances as well. He is actually getting quite a few. When we look at Nacho at 4.8, I would argue he's a bit more of a riskier pick because he's playing in a similar team to Chelsea where they are completely unpredictable. We don't know what Man United are going to do week in, week out, but with the attacking options they have right now, I think Nacho is one of the safer picks in that front four. I think he's really performed well under Ten Hag, and I think Ten Hag really does like Nacho. And look at his underlying numbers. 0.31 XG per 90 is absolutely fine for a player that's 4.8 million, remember. And 0.15 expected assists. It's not too bad. What I want from a player is goal threat, and we're getting that with somebody like a Nacho. Now, looking at the fixtures coming up for both, Chelsea's are okay. Fulham at home, Liverpool away is always going to be a tricky fixture. Wolves at home, followed by Crystal Palace away. The one thing we do need to remember with Chelsea is that they are heavily involved in cup competitions for both the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. So they will have to play the first and second leg of the Carabao Cup, basically either side of the Fulham game. So do be conscious of that. Man United, on the other hand, do have, I would argue, trickier fixtures. Tottenham at home, I think that's going to be an open game. I think Man United assets could do well in that. Then they have Wolves away. That's a really tricky game under Gary O'Neill. Then West Ham at home, never going to be a huge score. And then Aston Villa away. We saw Man United really hurt Aston Villa with that high line. Maybe they can do the same at Villa Park. So to conclude, based on the two players, you can see Cole Palmer is predicted to score the most points between the two over the next 4 game weeks. And I don't think we need to overthink it. If you don't have Cole Palmer in your team, I'm going to put it out there. He is going to be the #1 replacement, no matter how much you have in the bank. He is the man to own. Outside of Cole Palmer, if you already own him, and maybe you are looking for a budget enabler alongside him, maybe to rotate with another asset, I think Nacho is a really shrewd pick. You can keep him in there long term, knowing then that you will have loads of money in the bank to then invest in an Erling Haaland in game week 22, or go back to a Salah or Son when they do get knocked out of their respective competitions. So Cole Palmer, the #1 pick, but I think Nacho with these numbers and the fixtures being okay, definitely could be a great option. So moving away from the budget enablers, we need to now take a look at the mid-priced 6 million midfielders that are definitely catching my eye right now. So the two that I've isolated right now as picks are going to be Eze of Crystal Palace and Brighton's Pascal Gross. So first up, let's look at Eze, because of course you can see right now he is dominating when we're looking at the underlying stats. 0.39 xG per 90 is really solid numbers, and 0.22 expected assists. When we're looking at talisman and teams, Eze is the perfect example of that in this Crystal Palace team. And of course, with Michael Elise also being out injured for Crystal Palace, one would argue that's going to hinder Eze as an asset because there's one less person obviously creative in that team. But also you could look at it and think all the responsibility is going to be on Eze's shoulders. So if Palace are going to do well over these fixtures, you'd like to think Eze is going to step up. Big chances, not the best when we're comparing it to other assets, 0.45 per 90. We're not really looking at Eze as one of those that is going to be the last line of the attack. He definitely enters the box late with those opportunities that he does pick up. But with the absence of Elise, we can guarantee that Eze is going to be on penalties, which is a real bonus. And when we're taking a look at the fixtures coming up, Arsenal away just doesn't really feel like a good entry point for Eze. And I think that's why a lot of managers aren't going to be buying him, because we're looking for replacements now. And a lot of the time we do look very short-sighted and look at the fixtures that we have in front of us. And I think that's a reason why a lot of us are going to avoid Eze. But after that, Sheffield United at home, perfectly fine. Brighton away, who we know can see goals. And then Chelsea at home, which I'm not really going to argue that is a really tricky fixture either. So if you can look past game week 21 against Arsenal, I actually think the fixtures are quite good for Crystal Palace, and I would expect Eze to do okay over this period. Now, when we're looking at his competition in Pascal Gross around a similar price point, he is slightly more expensive at 6.4 million, and I wouldn't really associate Pascal Gross with being a fantastic FPL pick. But the main reason why Pascal Gross is on this list is because Brighton's unbelievable long-term fixtures. I've only picked out the first four here, but Wolves at home, Luton away, Palace at home, Tottenham away. And again, remember, Tottenham are a team that do concede goals. After this, the fixtures are as good for the long term. So if you're buying into Brighton, you know you're getting them for the long term. And with the absence of Matoma and Adingra in the international competitions, Pascal Gross only feels like the safe midfield pick that we know is going to play guaranteed 90 minutes week in, week out. And when I do look at these underlying numbers, I do think to myself, maybe we are just buying Pascal Gross because of the fixtures, because the underlying numbers are okay. 0.21 xG per 90, 0.22 expected assists per 90. They're decent numbers. They're not too bad. He isn't getting in amongst the big chances, but I will say he is very good on the bonus points. So if he is going to get attack and return, you can almost guarantee that he's also going to pick up at least one bonus point, which is a real big factor when we are looking at these midfielders around this price bracket. And you can see the predicted points. He is far and above away of Eze over the next 4 game weeks. So Pascal Gross doesn't really excite me as a pick, and being 6.4 million, really hard to justify paying that when you could get Cole Palmer at a lot cheaper, and you could also get Garnacho at like 1.5 million cheaper. But if you do want a piece of that Brighton attack, my advice would probably be just to get a Stupinan in defence and have that as your coverage from both a defensive and an attacking perspective. I think a Stupinan basically is everything you want in a Brighton asset. I think Pascal Gross at this price, I just can't really justify paying that for our FPL team. So because of that, I would pick Eze over Pascal Gross for our team. So last up, I want to look at what I would class the mid-priced premium assets that are available to us right now in the game, as I think there are a few fantastic picks. So there are some obvious picks in this list here that have been talked about for everybody. Bowen, Jota, Foden and Richarlison. I haven't put Odegaard in this list because I haven't really seen enough from both Arsenal and Odegaard to justify us paying that money for somebody like an Odegaard, because I think these players here are the ones that we need to take a look at. So first up, Jarrod Bowen. We can take a look for 8.1 million, the most expensive of all the options, but he did limp off in that FA Cup game against Bristol City, so please do be cautious about that. And the big issue about game week 21, it's one of the longest game weeks of the season. So when we have the deadline Friday evening, the last game won't kick off until 10 days later of game week 21. So I don't think we're going to get a West Ham press conference to update us regarding Jarrod Bowen, which is a big issue. But we sometimes just have to have these situations and make our own judgment on them. Right now, based on the information that we have, I probably still would just take a punt on Jarrod Bowen and hope for the best and expect him to be available for the weekend, because he isn't actually playing for another week's time. So he does have a little bit of rest to recover from whatever he did pick up in that fixture. But looking at the numbers, 0.41 xG per 90 is really good. 0.15 expected assists, not too bad, but we are looking at Jarrod Bowen as mainly a goal scorer in this West Ham team. And he is decent on the big chances, 0.79. The big factor I have with Jarrod Bowen is the impact of Kudos being away at the African Cup of Nations, I think that does negatively impact Bowen. And also Paqueta, he also went off in that FA Cup game. If he is out longer term, I think this is going to really hinder Bowen as an option, with Antonio already being out for the teams. But with all that said, I do think Bowen is just the safe pick over a 5 or 6 game week period. I think he's one of those that you could bring into your teams and just leave there for the long term, knowing exactly what you're going to get from him. Now, one of the players that I think is the complete opposite of Jarrod Bowen is going to be Diogo Jota. Now, we know Liverpool's fixtures are pretty mixed, but I think Diogo Jota is expected to come in and get more game time in the absence of Mo Salah. But the big factor about it is we really don't know if Jota's going to start week in, week out. If he does, the numbers are great. 0.48 XG per 90, 0.22 expected assists. And when I look at Diogo Jota, I think he is the best of all the options available from a decision-making perspective. Outside of Mo Salah, I do think Jurgen Klopp is going to fall back on Jota, because when we see Darwin Núñez snatch at chances, we see poor decision making from other players. He is one of the few that he has available to him where I think he knows he is going to make the right decision at the right times. We saw that in the FA Cup, for example, when he came on against Arsenal. So Diogo Jota, if you could sit here and tell me he's going to play every single minute, he'd be straight into my team. I think he's phenomenal, but I just think it's going to be uncertainty week in, week out, what position Jota plays and what his expected minutes are. And because of that reason, I don't think he is an asset that I personally would look to invest in. Now, a player that I think is just almost impossible to ignore is going to be Phil Foden at 7.8 million, 0.27 XG per 90, 0.27 expected assists per 90. I discussed previously about Pascal Gross and how his numbers weren't really that good, and Foden's aren't much better. However, I just think Phil Foden is playing unbelievable football right now. And when we're looking at a team like Man City, we know that they are just going to score goals against any team that they do feature in. So even though the numbers aren't fantastic, and I don't think he's going to score a hatful of goals over the next 4 or 5 game weeks, he is playing for a team right now that I just think are starting to purr. I think they're really starting to hit gear. And with the return of somebody like a Kevin De Bruyne, I don't actually think this is going to impact Phil Foden. I think he's playing too well. And I think it's actually Julian Alvarez that may make way in the team. The only issue with Phil Foden that we do need to note is Kevin De Bruyne coming back isn't going to help Phil Foden for minutes. I do think we could see rotation at times, and that is going to be the only issue with him, because the way that he's playing right now, and Man City slowly starting to get into form, I think Phil Foden, for me, is probably the obvious replacement for both Salah and Son in this price range. I'd actually have him above Jarrod Bowen right now, just because of that slight injury that he did pick up. And he's also predicted to score the most points over the next 4 game weeks. Now, the last player that we do need to look at is Richarlison, 6.9 million, 0.6 XG per 90. He is the best of the bunch in that department, but the worst in terms of expected assists. But end of the day, when we're buying a midfielder, playing as a forward, I want him to score goals, and Richarlison is kind of doing that right now in the team. So Richarlison looks really, really good from an attacking perspective. The only issues that I do have about him is his minutes. He's been coming off early in every game for Spurs. But maybe with the absence of Son, Richarlison will be forced to play the majority of minutes because the options available aren't really there. I know they've now signed Timo Werner, but again, I don't really know if that's going to impact Richarlison's minutes or not. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty about Richarlison. I think he's a great option. I think you probably do want a piece of the Spurs attack while Son's out, and Richarlison is the obvious pick at 6.9 million. But I just don't feel as excited by him right now, because I do think the absence of Son is actually going to really hinder Spurs from an attacking output. So if I had to rank these right now, I probably would have Phil Foden number 1. I just think with the explosive nature that he has in this Man City team, I think he is the number 1 pick. Jarrod Bowen a close second just because of that injury that he did pick up. I'd then put Richarlison 3rd and Diogo Jota number 4. But that's going to wrap up today's video. I really hope it's provided some value. As always, if you have any questions, please do put them in the comment section. Have an amazing day. Make sure you do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.